on the Francophone side at 1 o'clock today, but this is the first workshop in our Brilliant Labs Professional Learning Week menu, and the first time I've hosted a live session using our BL meeting space. So before we get started, I need to notify everyone that the session today is going to be recorded and will be made available to anyone who has the link. I just have to remember to start recording. There. Forward to hearing ideas you may have. There's a public chat area to the left, as I mentioned earlier. Some of you may not have heard me say that if you're just joining. But you can chat in that, feel free to chat in that public area. If you have any ideas or links you'd like to share, I encourage you to post them in that public chat area as well. And the information that is contained in that chat log can be saved by anyone in today's session. So you'll notice above the public chat, there's 3 little dots. Excuse me, there's 3 little dots. If you click on those dots, you'll see the option to save the chat. So at the end, if you'd like to have a copy of what was there, you can save that. If for some reason you happen to get kicked out of the session, you can log back in by following the same link. If you happen to click on the phone receiver that's located at the bottom of your screen, you'll see it in the center just below the presentation. You will no longer hear the audio portion of the session, and you may have to exit and log back in. Finally, please keep your microphone muted. There will be an opportunity at the end of the session for questions and answers. However, please feel free to type those questions as you think of them, and I'll try to adjust them at the end. But I see there's lots of chatter going on, so hopefully we can get to some of those. And again, please feel free to share answers with each other. It's a collaborative session, very interactive. So a little bit about me. I am currently seconded as a Brilliant Labs program specialist, working mainly in the northern part of New Brunswick in Anglophone North School District. Prior to this role, I was a technology lead in ASDN and former District 15, and I taught at Bathurst High School for 12 years. So most of my career has been spent empowering teachers to step outside the box and embark in opportunities where they can empower their own students to become stronger and more confident in their abilities. A lot of what I do is focused on maker-centered learning and project-based learning, from no tech to high tech and everywhere in between. So welcome everyone, and I hope that you will find this session helpful. I see we have some people from Miramichi joining us, the southern part of the province. I'm going to have a hard time trying to keep myself on task here and not read the chat along the side as we're going.
Lisa, that's all right. We have your brilliant back.
Yeah, my brilliant back. Well, that's good, Jake. If you guys keep chatting along the side. So we're going to try something a little different. I've never done this as well. It's a polling feature with our meeting space. So I'm going to ask for your input again. I would like to learn a little more about my audience and your comfort level using Scratch. So I'm going to start this poll. And it says, select the option below to start the poll. It's going to be A, B, C, or D. There we go. Now, please help me out by answering the polling question. Maybe you're a newbie. I see we got a lot of newbies and do not have a Scratch account, or maybe you attended an introductory session in the past and you created an account, but that's about as far as you got. Some of you may have used it with your class and you know the basics, but you probably feel the students know a lot more than you do. You might feel quite comfortable with Scratch and know your way around the program, and you may be able to create programs yourself. So you might be an expert Scratcher. So look at that. We have a lot of newbies. Now, I'm not sure, maybe Jacob, you can help me out here. I don't know how long, if I leave the poll or if I can just keep this up and move on to my next slide.
Yeah, Lisa, you are not a newbie. I am the newbie here with the poll thing. You keep going. I'm not sure.
We're not sure. We're just trying this out here. So look at that. We have, 50% are newbies with Scratch. So you'll get a lot of information from this session today. So let's move on to slide 5, and I'm not sure what will happen with my results as I move, but I'm going to keep the poll up there. Okay. So no matter what your comfort level is with Scratch, you are in the right session today. But today's session is subtitled Collaboration and Creativity, no matter the location. So by the end of our time together, I hope you'll feel empowered to give Scratch a try and incorporate it into your curriculum in the upcoming school year. If you are already a serious Scratcher, like the 6% that I have, I hope you'll leave with some additional ideas for using Scratch. This session is not designed to teach you how to use Scratch, but rather to provide you with some ideas, tips, and resources that you can use no matter if you're face-to-face with your students or working in that online environment, which we might encounter again this fall. There are loads of tutorials online, and Brilliant Labs has also some how-to videos on our YouTube channel, which I'll guide you to later. So I'm going to close the poll, I believe. Let's go back here. Now, hold on, please bear with me as I minimize the window. There we go. There, so we're back to the public chat. Now, I may be preaching to the choir here, especially those of you who have used Scratch in the past, but it's important to note the benefits of getting kids coding. I encourage you to use, again, this chat area to share your thoughts and experiences as we learn from each other this afternoon. So coding is a great way to develop problem-solving skills and collaboration. Although it might look like students are working in a silo, many of them are reaching out to their peers for troubleshooting input, searching online for a piece of code that they might need, or just getting feedback from their friends about a game that they just created. I've encountered kids so engaged in their work that they don't want to take a break. In addition to that stick-to-itiveness of solving a problem, coding also fosters creativity. So instead of simply playing games online, listening to stories, or pointing and clicking on choices, they can be creators of content instead of just the consumers of that content. So there's a lot involved, or a lot that can be learned by coding. So here's just 10 reasons to teach coding. I taught computer science many, many years ago at the high school level without a background in computer programming. So don't feel that you need to have that background to get started with Scratch. At that time, the coding was all text-based, and I remember telling my students that despite the fact that they would never code in QBasic again or C Visual Basic, it was not the programming language that mattered. They were learning the basics of writing a program and the terminology of coding. But above all, they were developing their problem-solving skills and logical thinking process, and other skills that they can only achieve by actually doing. So I'm going to say 20 years later, but it's 20 plus years later, coding is still around, but it's a lot easier and more graphical. It's no longer just a subject that high school students take, but rather it's a way for kids to create, design, present, and build information. When we can bring coding into our curriculum, we have to remember that we are not teaching kids to become computer programmers. Just like when we teach mathematics, we don't expect our students to become great mathematicians, nor do we expect our students to become world-famous authors. We need to provide our students with opportunities where they can develop the skills necessary to be successful, lifelong learners. And coding, it's just one of those ways. Now, you might ask, why Scratch? Because there are lots of coding languages out there, but Scratch is not just a coding language. It's also an online community where you can share your creations with others around the world. As young people create and share projects in Scratch, they learn to think creatively, reason systematically, and work collaboratively. For technology to be effective, Seymour Papert said it should provide easy ways for novices to get started, which is referred to as those low floors. But he also said that technology should have ways for people to work on increasingly sophisticated projects over time, which he referred to as high ceilings. When the Scratch Foundation, in collaboration with the Lifelong Kindergarten Group at the MIT Media Lab, started developing the Scratch programming language, they designed it with low floors, their high ceilings, and they added what they referred to as wide walls. So Scratch was designed so that people could create a wide range of projects, not just games, but also interactive stories, art, music, animations, and simulations. And that's just to name a few. So we're going to go into some tips for getting started in Scratch. So Scratch is free, and it's available for anyone to join. Although it was designed especially for kids ages 8 to 16, it's used by millions of people around the world, all ages. And there are 5 options available for use. That's 5 that I could find. So the first one is students can use Scratch without joining or creating an account. However, they'll not be able to share projects. They won't be able to create studios or post comments. They can download and save their files on their computers, but then they'll need to upload them again for editing purposes. But that's one way that they can use Scratch. So if you go to scratch.mit.edu and click Create, they can get started right away. Users can also create their own accounts. So kids who are under 16 will be asked to provide a parent or guardian's email address. Sometimes teachers choose to get the kids to insert their own teacher email address so they can control that account. But for the most part, they enter the parent's email address, and a parent can verify whether or not they can share the content. A third option is teachers can create an educator's account and create usernames for their students. Now that's the way that I prefer to use Scratch. It gives you a little bit more control over things as well. And we'll get into the teacher account shortly. Users can also download the Scratch app and use it offline. So if you don't have the internet, or if that's an issue, let's say this coming fall, some of your kids are at home learning and they don't have the internet. Well, if they do have a laptop available to them, they can download, or someone can download the program for them and install it on their laptop, and they can use it just like anyone else could, but they don't need to have internet access. And the fifth way is that users can download the Scratch Junior app, which is designed for kids ages 5 to 7, and that can run on a tablet. So there's lots of ways to actually get into Scratch and use Scratch. Now, my preferred method is joining Scratch for Educators. So I'm not sure how many of you have joined Scratch for Educators, but I would highly recommend you to sign up for an Educator account. It's free. It allows you to create classes and accounts for your students. It gives you more control over their accounts and the ability to change their passwords if they forget. Now, I know I've been in situations where kids will say, oh, I forgot my password. And so if you have control over their account through a teacher account, you can quickly change the password for them. There are all kinds of resources for educators that include facilitator guides and access to free coding curriculum. So if you go on to scratch.mit.edu/educators, even if you went to the main screen, there is a little tab that says For Educators. You'll be able to click there and find all the different resources available to you. There's coding cards, tutorials. There's even a section for curriculum. So for Educators section on the Scratch website has links to resources that are pertinent to those in the education field. So you can join the free curriculum program as well. That's true, they can share, if you have an Educator account and you create classes and studios, you can share everything with each other as well in that platform. If you already have an existing Scratch account, don't despair. You can send in a request to have that changed to an educator account, or you can create a brand new one and request an educator account as well. So there are guides to help you with the sign up process. And again, that's all at scratch.mit.edu/educators. Okay, so into some ideas. Somebody asked, can it be on an iPad for regular one? Now, I'm not sure what the oldest version is that you can download it on, like the oldest version of iPads, but it is available. Scratch Junior is. You can also run Scratch through your browser on your iPad, simply by going to Safari or Chrome, I believe, and typing in scratch.mit.edu. So you can access it that way. There is no, not that I know of, there is no actual Scratch app other than the Scratch Junior app. So someone might want to correct me on that, but that's what I've found so far. So some ideas of how you might want to use Scratch in your classroom. So on Thursday nights, well, I guess our last one's going to be this Wednesday afternoon, but Thursday evenings, we've hosted these Brilliant Labs live Twitter chats. And during a recent Brilliant Labs live Twitter chat, the host asked teachers how they get their classes started with using Scratch. So many of those replies that had students starting simple, just giving them time to play and explore. Students aren't afraid to point and click and drag and drop and do things and see what happens. They're not afraid to learn that way. So it's important to give them the time to figure things out, and they can teach each other. And there's quite an excitement in the room when you see kids saying, oh, did you see this? Look, you drag this block out, look what happens, and I can spin that cat around, and I can make that cat meow 15,000 times. So you might want to get them to turn their volumes down when you're starting to use Scratch. So how empowering is it to give kids that type of control and teaching each other? I wouldn't get hung up on the idea that you have to show them the how to do something. You can guide them through the tutorials. There are some great coding cards that you can download as well and print. And those are great to use to give kids some little pieces of coding and snippet of coding if they want to learn how to maybe resize a sprite. Sprites are simply the characters in Scratch. But those are excellent little codes to get them started. You can also give them a simple task to complete that they can expand upon. When I use Scratch with kids, I usually just show them a few features, getting started, moving around, using the sound feature. Again, get them to turn down that audio, and then just give them time to explore. Again, my recommendation is to simply start simple. That comes back to that low floor, high ceiling. However, it's very important to not hold your students back. Just let them go with it. And you can be amazed at what they can come up with. So they can create maybe a story in Scratch. They might want to make some music. There's also some other areas or other resources out there that you can look at, and we'll take a look shortly at Scratch Ed. I came across a document with all kinds of ideas of different types of Scratch projects that you can do with your kids. I know Miss Phillips, I'm not sure if she's on here, but I believe Miss Phillips is from Nova Scotia. She's used it for geometry outcomes for primary to grade 6, because you can actually create 2D shapes in there using the pin tool. Some other ideas that you might want to try with Scratch. You can get your students to maybe create a math game, animate a poem, or even teach a concept. Think of Scratch as being a presentation tool that goes beyond what PowerPoint can do. So Scratch is a great tool for differentiation, again, because of those low floors and high ceilings, and you can be quite surprised at the outcome. So again, don't think of Scratch as being a platform where kids are learning to code, but it's rather a tool that they are coding to learn. So when students develop a project in Scratch, there's an area in the program where they have to write instructions and provide notes and credits. These two windows are an important part of the design process, and they are a few additional ways that students can meet some of their literacy goals. They'll need to provide clear and concise instructions, in addition to providing credit for any photos, music, or other assets that they used or that are not their original designs. So I have on this slide a little area that shows instructions, notes, and credits. I have a copy of this young student's haiku poem that he created, and the birds animate and fly around. But it's lacking the instructions. So if you're looking at ways to link to your literacy outcomes, you might want to get them to do maybe some process writing, or even write those clear instructions in there as well. So it's very relevant to the kids. Scratch also works well with the Makey Makey. And although you don't need a Makey Makey to create audio files in Scratch, it does add interactivity to displays. So students can record their voices and create blackout poetry or interactive posters. So here I have an example of two of these extension blocks. So in Scratch, there's some blocks called extension blocks. And one that I played around with yesterday for the first time was the text-to-speech and the translate block. So you can actually get your students creating little programs. You can set the language to anything that you want, and it will play it back for you. So it's a neat little way to maybe enhance your language learning by using those extension blocks. I have some examples here of Scratch and audio. I mentioned a few minutes ago the blackout poetry. So this is something that I did with some students at Jaca River School. And this was a very quick session. So I had a template already designed for them, and you can see the blocks there that when the up arrow key is pressed, it's going to play some sounds. When the down arrow key is pressed, it'll play sounds, and so forth. So you can just use your keyboard to activate those arrows to play those particular sounds. But we went a step further, and I had the kids create some blackout poems. So they took some a lead pencil. They shaded out the areas that they didn't want the words to appear. They highlighted or just put a little box around the words that they wanted to appear. And then they recorded each of those words. So when they used the Makey Makey and touched the black area, the pencil, it would play the words. They could change the sound effects of the words, make them louder, softer, kind of a robot sounding voice. And that's all done in the Scratch platform itself. So it's another neat little way to enhance what you're doing. But again, you don't have to have a Makey Makey to do that. You can still do all the coding. The kids just have to use the arrow keys instead of touching the actual poem itself. You can be creative. Maybe draw the arrow keys beside each of the letters so that they'll know what key to press to play their poem. Another project that I worked on this past year in the fall was at Parkwood Heights Elementary School, and a grade 2 class, something grade 2 or 3, my apologies to the teacher, she had the students create portraits. And with those portraits, the students wrote little pieces of information about themselves, and they shared it, they recorded their audio, put it all into one big Scratch file, and they made an interactive display for their parents for their November parent-teacher. So here I have a little girl. She's clicking on the copper tape that's attached to a Makey Makey, which again is attached to Scratch. But you don't have to have the Makey Makey to make it work. You just have to remember which arrow keys you're pressing to play the sounds. So I've only provided a snippet of resources. There's lots out there. And those are only a few that you might find useful. Besides the tutorials and guides posted on the scratch.mit.edu site, I would encourage you to check out our Brilliant Labs YouTube channel and search for Scratch videos. There are some great how-to videos on our channel, in addition to some wonderful Maker Ed ideas. I would also encourage you to join Twitter and follow our Brilliant Labs live Twitter chats. You can even follow Scratch on Twitter. You can even follow Scratch on Twitter. Reaching out on social media and creating your own professional learning network is a great resource for ideas and troubleshooting tips. I just want to say that just don't be afraid to dive in and start using Scratch. It's amazing how it empowers your students. And remember, after all, they are our future. So we have about 5 minutes left. That is the presentation slides that I have. I'm going to show you. If you have any questions, you can add them into the chat. I'm hoping that people kept up on that. I'm going to share my screen. I'll take a chance and share my entire screen. Let's see, share. There we go. And I'm just going to show you some of the links that we have here. That's right, Andrew. We do ask the students to dive in, and we should do the same. Don't be afraid of Scratch. You can't break anything. You can delete a file. If you saw my Scratch account, you'd see that I never deleted any files. I have about 15 called Untitled. Okay, so here is the Brilliant Labs YouTube channel. So if you wanted to find the Scratch, there's all kinds of neat videos on here, but if you wanted to find the Scratch ones, simply type in Scratch, and you'll see all kinds that are created with Scratch in mind. So we have an Earth Day PSA challenge that we'd put out, how to make a Scratch game. We have another Scratch game one. There's Scratch, I'm going to mess up this word, I know, Fibonacci. Jacob, did I say it right?
You
Perfect.
got her, Lisa. You messed up on Twitter, but not Fibonacci.
I can't get Twitter, nope. So there's all kinds of neat videos there. I'm going to show you what a teacher account looks like. So on my account, I have my stuff, my classes, account settings. I click on my little folder. The wheels are spinning, yep. You'll see that I have shared projects and unshared projects. Now that's something important I want to bring about to you, is that when you have an unshared project, so let's say students are working on something and they have a project that they haven't shared yet. So I'm just going to click on this Untitled one. You'll see a yellow bar across the top of the screen. So even though you have a teacher's account, you cannot access a student's file unless they share it with you. So they'll say, but Miss, I've shared it. You'll notice across the top of the page, it says this project is not shared, so only you can see it. It means only the student can see it. You have to actually click the share button. So students that create their own accounts and haven't had parents verify them, they can't share any of their content. So again, that's a good reason for teachers to create their teacher accounts. This was the haiku. You can remix other students' works, which is a really neat feature in Scratch. If I click on See Inside, I'm going to start playing the music here for Jeopardy. So you'll see it looks like a fairly complicated program. He's just got his text. He's got every line of text in there, but there's no code with each of those lines of text. His only code is on his sprites, which are the little birds, his swans, I guess. So he has some code there, and that code is identical on each one of the swans, so we can just copy and paste it. I mentioned earlier in our presentation about the Scratch curriculum. This was something that I found on it was a link on the scratch.mit.edu site. So there's all kinds of neat ideas here. Some of these projects are older, but it at least gives you an idea of some ways that you can make your curriculum connections. So creating animated poems, making a book report, look at it as being another presentation tool. Here we have a biography. There's algebra geometry units. All kinds of neat examples there. And that one was found, that PDF document was found on Scratch Ed. So it's scratched.gse.harvard.edu. I'm going to post, I have a copy of the presentation and I'll share it with you. I have a URL, a shortened URL, and I've saved this slideshow so you can actually get into Scratch Ed and find that link. I'm just going to copy my URL and I'll put it in the chat box here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And there's a URL that you can follow to access this slideshow and some of the resources. So I want to thank everyone for joining in. If you want to stay on afterwards, I know we said we end at 1:30, but I'll stay on for a while. If you have any questions, if you want to open up your microphone, please feel free. Again, thanks for coming.
This is amazing, Lisa. And just to give everyone a little bit of feedback of what's been going on in the back end, at our maximum here on this platform that you're using, we had 132 users concurrent. Over on Scratch, we have an additional 40 or Scratch. My goodness, I have Scratch on the mind. On YouTube, there were another 45 people streaming at the same time as well. And our colleagues over on the Francophone side, they were sharing their Maker Fun presentation on outdoor making at the same time. So lots of engagement. Make sure that you check out our other Brilliant Labs events this week. We have, oh my goodness, what, 21 more offered in two languages. No, 19 more. But that was great. I really liked how you linked the instructions and the notes within a Scratch. And it's probably a very underutilized tool or function to look for things like persuasive writing and instructional writing. That's neat.
Thank you. Oh, I'm glad Heather's going to check out our Brilliant Labs videos. I see recognize some names who are, I think, upstairs above me right now at Superior Middle School. So now, Jacob, we recorded this session, and I guess I'm going to stop the recording right now.
That's right. We've discovered that it's important that the person who is the owner of the session to stop the recording.
There. Okay. So now our recording is stopped. Is that going to be posted on our YouTube site, or where will it be housed later?
Yeah, good question. We'll have to figure all that out. So the YouTube
I
stream.
guess we're going to share the link with everybody in an email to participate.
Okay. I've also made a copy of this for those of them who are still kind of hanging around. I've made a copy